do a show. I have found this out. Hello there. Welcome in to a Thursday edition of the show. Super prepared, as you can tell, for today's show. Appreciate you listening, whether it's on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app, which you did for free. And that app is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics today. Some good, some bad. And I want your thoughts all the same. 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show. I have a special guest next segment to preview the Broncos-Packers game from the Green Bay perspective. Rookie will be back on the program. Looking forward to that. And I'd like to start with that game. Because as you may have seen and heard, the odds makers don't believe in the Denver Broncos on Sunday. Despite the Broncos playing at home on their 10-game winning streak, they are betting underdogs against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday. Bo Nix, super upset about it, as you might imagine.
I don't really care. My mom thinks we'll win, so that's all that matters.
That might be the line of the year. There are going to be mark my words, there are going to be t-shirts made for this Broncos playoff run. And if I had the means to do it, I would make them myself and profit off of them. My mom thinks we'll win. It'll be a t-shirt, at least a sign, as soon as this Sunday. But that might be the Broncos' new mantra. My mom thinks we'll win. It's a good line from Bo Nix. I got to give it to him. It's a really good line. So the Broncos can use the familiar trope of disrespect to motivate them. I don't really think at this point we should be really talking about the motivation of a football team, the Broncos or anybody else. The stakes are as high as they can be. We got a month left in the season. Home field, divisions, wild cards, all of this stuff is now up for grabs. So I don't know that I'm taking, and I don't think that the Broncos they'll probably use it, right? Because athletes are athletes and they use every perceived slight to fire them up. But I don't think that the fact that the Green Bay Packers are favorites is some big motivating factor for the Denver Broncos. But what I am curious about, I'd like to involve you in this conversation, because I have said very recently, I don't know that the perception of the Denver Broncos will change that much between now and the end of the season. The only caveat to that would be if they blow out these opponents that make up their most difficult stretch of the season. So, but let's just take it this one game against Green Bay. Because part of why I said what I said was because I have been saying for weeks now that the way that the Denver Broncos win, as unpretty as it might be, is actually a sign of how good they are. That they can make every game follow the same script. They have that much control over it. And I have been saying for weeks this team deserves credit, deserves respect. When I say that I don't think they'll win a Super Bowl, I'm not saying they have no chance. I'm just saying I like other teams a little bit better. But when I bring out, especially after the Philadelphia game, after the Kansas City game, and I say every game is like this, regardless of the opponent. In some weeks, that's a negative, but I think overall, and against some particular opponents, it's a positive. If the Denver Broncos beat the Packers on Sunday the same way they beat everyone else, is that going to change your mind about this team? I don't think that it will. Even though Green Bay is favored to win the game, even though Green Bay is arguably the favorite in the NFC, if the Broncos on Sunday do what they have done to most of the last 10 teams they've faced, I don't think the perception from most people will change one bit. Because the Broncos have done this a few times this season. And look, the entire National Football League is down. Like, let's just call it what it is. There are no great teams in the NFL this year. The minute I tried to proclaim the Rams that, they went out and lost to the Panthers. So no one is exceptional. No one is special. No one is historic. But that doesn't mean no one is good. There are good teams. They're just not teams that we're going to be debating with our friends for years to come who is better, this team or this team. Yeah, here are the Broncos in a league rife with chaos. Have every game follow a similar script, and it's a script that the Broncos come out on top time and time again, and yet I don't feel like perception about this team has changed that much. So I don't think that if they do this against Green Bay, it's going to change people's minds. Because I think Green Bay, even though they sit where they sit, is viewed like so many other teams in the NFL as good but flawed. So another unimpressive one-score game that the Broncos win. I don't expect a ton of people to text or call into this show on Monday and say, you know what? Broncos are now a Super Bowl contender. I didn't think they were. They did it against the Packers. Or has perception of Kansas City and Philadelphia changed so much that now those don't even look like quality wins anymore, which I've talked about. That's kind of the issue, is that no one has great wins because there are no great teams. But maybe that's what's happened. Maybe people now look back at the Eagles win and the Chiefs win even a couple of weeks ago and go, yeah, no, not that good of a win. And this now is the one. You notice how we've done that? We've done that with Philly. We did that with Kansas City. Now we're doing it with Green Bay. No, this is the game. I have to defend the Broncos at least to this extent. We have we have moved the goalpost back a little bit on this team, haven't we? Which is fine. It happens. Expectations get raised and lowered as the season goes on. But every time they reach the next goalpost, it's like, well, yeah, no, it's this one. And I kind of feel like it's going to be the same thing with the Green Bay Packers. I think you could argue this is the best team they've played. But there were other games that at the time felt similar, and yet the reaction was not wildly different than when the Broncos beat the Raiders. So I'm relying on you. Will this game change your perception if the Broncos win it in the same way they win all of these games. Because I think that's what's driving the lack of belief in this team more than anything else. It's shades of the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs, except with this Broncos team, there's no long history to go back on and believe that the team is capable of more. Bo Nix is not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Tom Brady. But I heard a lot of the same things about last year's Chiefs. They can't keep doing this. This is luck. This is the officials. Doesn't matter who they beat. It was the same refrain every single week. And the Broncos are getting that same treatment. Does beating the Packers change your perception of the Denver Broncos? I will tell you the way that it could is if the Broncos absolutely demolish the Packers on Sunday. But I am here to tell you that won't happen. Why? One, because the Packers are too good to let that happen. But two, the Denver Broncos have a very specific vision in place. The idea that your record says you are what your record says you are, but also at this point in the season, we kind of know who you are. The Broncos like these games. They like these kind of games. Sure, in an ideal world, they would blow every team out, but Sean Payton has made it very clear that just doesn't happen in today's NFL. And in this year, it's hard to prove them wrong. Most NFL games are one-score games. And the Broncos have almost perfected the ability to win those kind of games. And I kind of feel like they play the game that way. They play every game to their identity is to win every game close. Defensive oriented, good on special teams, field position game, running the football, not asking their quarterback to do too much. All of these things lend itself to every game being close. This is the way the Broncos want to win. Once in a while, they'd like a reprieve from it, like the Bengals game or the Cowboys game. But for the most part, this is where they live. This is where they're comfortable, and they believe their opponents will be uncomfortable. So I don't think Sunday's going to be a blowout in favor of the Denver Broncos. And I think it will be a close game. But I don't think that the Broncos, following the same formula they followed for 10 weeks, even against the Green Bay Packers, ultimately changes the narrative surrounding this team. But you tell me, 719-24-7, 1313. Would another close Broncos victory to extend their winning streak to 11 games, beating the Green Bay Packers, change your perception about this team? Coming up next, rookie will join me from Green Bay. What is the Packers' side of all this? How big of a game do they view it? And how much could a win in Denver legitimize the Packers as the perceived favorite in the NFC? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. We are efforting a rookie here from 107.5 The Fan in Green Bay to get his perspective on Sunday's game. The premise, if the Broncos win this game like every other game that they win, is that going to move the needle for you? Are you going to believe more in this team as a Super Bowl contender? I don't think that it will. And by the way, I don't know that it changes my perspective that much either. I really don't. It's a showcase game. It's a high-profile game. It's a lot of fun. That a game between the Packers and the Broncos means this much. I mean, nostalgia from the first Broncos Super Bowl win probably runs through your head as a Broncos fan. I mean, it's fun. It's high profile. I think I'm kind of settled on where I am with the Denver Broncos. And now I need to see it in the postseason. Like that's really the next test for me. I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Want to get to this NFL story. Joe Burrow had some interesting comments yesterday. If you did not hear, here is a Joe Burrow kind of contemplating the entirety of his existence in public in front of the media.
If I want to keep doing this, I have to have fun doing it. I've been through a lot, and if it's not fun, then what am I doing it for?
Now, I can certainly relate to Joe Burrow if this is about his birthday, because I will be open and honest, and one place you do not want to be on my birthday is around me. I'm one of those people, is one of my many flaws, but I can understand if Joe Burrow is very reflective and maybe a little bit melancholy on his birthday, although, and people say this to me, but I think it applies even more to Joe Burrow. What do you have to be sad about? You're Joe Burrow. People don't tell me you're Joe Burrow, but you get my point. Like, your job, your kids, things are going pretty well for you. Why are you such a Debbie Downer? But this isn't about me. This is about Joe Burrow. I think it's more than the birthday blues with him, because he mentioned something in there that I think is very important, what he has been through. This is not a guy who has just lost a bunch of football games, right? We hear some of those kind of sentiments coming from guys who have just lost for a long time, and they're like, man, I don't know about this anymore. I'm beaten down. With Joe Burrow, it's some losing, but it's mostly the numerous injuries and rehabs that he has gone through to just get back to the Bengals, only to rejoin a team that is incredibly flawed, that does very little to protect him from his next major injury. And given the track history of this organization, there doesn't seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel. They will have that 1 year, right? They will have the year that they beat Mahomes. They went to the Super Bowl, took the Rams right down to the wire, probably should have won that game. But other than that, it's been some great, brilliant Joe Burrow moments, but it has been a lot of nothing for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this is an emotion and a statement from Joe Burrow that unless there is a course correction in his career, we will be talking about Joe Burrow like we talked about Andrew Luck. We are going to be sitting on our couch one night getting ready to watch a preseason game, and all of a sudden the news is going to come down from any number of NFL insiders that will say Joe Burrow has decided to retire. I'm not the only person that's come to this conclusion because it's a pretty obvious one. There is a fairly recent example of somebody who I think who felt very much the same Joe Burrow feels now. A guy that has the weight of a franchise on his shoulders, whose franchise, I think, repeatedly lets him down. And he literally sacrifices his body for all of this. And Andrew Luck decided all those years ago it's just not worth it. And I think Joe Burrow is trending in the same direction. And who could blame him? Like, we could talk about, how we would all love to be professional athletes. And it was Joe Burrow's dream probably to be a quarterback in the NFL. Probably loves the game of football. But you know this, even if you're in a job that you always dreamed of having, and other people look and say, what a great job you have. There are still aspects of your job that are job-like, and aspects of your job that at times are soul-crushing. And just because it's the career path you've chosen for yourself, and other people may have like it and wish they had it, doesn't mean that it's all sunshine and rainbows all the time. I have my dream job. There are days that I am a little bit bummed out. Thankfully, not a ton, because I'm not getting my butt kicked by 250-pound Adonises that are trying to take my head off. But I think everyone can relate to what Joe Burrow is saying there. And for some people, it's a mental toll. Some people, it's a physical one. Some, it's both. For Joe Burrow, it's both. And I'm not gonna knock him, because the Cincinnati Bengals have existed as an entity for a long time, and their reputation precedes them. In many ways, they did not deserve Joe Burrow, and still do not deserve Joe Burrow. The system in place, because of their buffoonery, gifts them something they do not deserve. And they have been given a supreme talent at the quarterback position. And all they have done is wasted him and gotten him beat up and injured, only for him to battle back and look brilliant. I mean, he was pretty good against Buffalo, not as good as the guy on the other side of the field, but I mean, he's a supreme quarterback talent, and this Bengals organization is wasting him. So when I say there needs to be a course correction, or Joe Burrow is going to go down the same path as Andrew Luck, I am not talking about the Cincinnati Bengals getting their act together, because you have followed this team for as long or longer than I have. That is hoping against hope. That is almost impossible. It is almost impossible to think that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to change their ways. So the course correction I am referring to is the Bengals trading Joe Burrow. I think that is the only way that Joe Burrow can find his joy. And I don't think that Joe Burrow has to win every football game that he plays in. That's not what this is about. This is about a guy who has gotten incredibly beaten up over the years, works his butt off to get back, and it's the same team he left with no hope anywhere that they're going to improve. No defense to support him, no offensive line to protect him. I think the only real way to correct course here and to secure the services of Joe Burrow in the NFL for years to come is for the Cincinnati Bengals to trade him. What Joe Burrow said yesterday was not a trade demand. And I don't know if he's ever going to demand a trade. But in some part of his mind, he's begging for one. And I'll tell you one team that immediately came to my mind: the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota was one of the NFL's best teams, at least in terms of record, like 5 minutes ago. And because they made a bad bet on the worst quarterback in the 2024 draft class, it has taken them from a sneaky Super Bowl team to the worst team in a division that it doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of upward mobility over the next, now Chicago is there. Green Bay and Detroit have been constants. Now you have Chicago that seems to have gotten it right. How are the Vikings going to lift themselves up off the mat? With J.J. McCarthy? That would be an obvious landing spot for Joe Burrow. And I still believe that Minnesota has a roster that can win. You put a Joe Burrow in there. I mean, and this is not a stretching of reality here. They won a lot with Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold, to his credit, has shown he's not a one-hit wonder. He's doing the same thing in Seattle. But even with that, Joe Burrow's a better quarterback than he is. I mean, there are other places, and in really, the better question is how many places are worse than Cincinnati? I mean, look at this team when Joe Burrow's not around and when Joe Flacco can't keep them afloat for a couple of weeks. That's why we wanted to give the guy the MVP last year for missing the playoffs, because it was remarkable that Joe Burrow could get Cincinnati as far as he got them. The best thing in this situation for the NFL and for Joe Burrow is for the Cincinnati Bengals to trade Joe Burrow. And the Vikings can give up their draft pick this year. They can give Cincinnati J.J. McCarthy, say Zach Taylor, have at it. Because the Vikings made a bad bet. But there are a number of other teams that you could see. But I think if Joe Burrow is going to not become the next Andrew Luck, he has to be in a different uniform, has to be with a different organization than Cincinnati. Because there is no hope that they're ever going to get their act together to keep this guy from getting injured over and over and over again. 719-24-7, 1313, more Drive Time Sports after this. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and we want to make it even better with $1,000 towards your winter wish list. You could use it for holiday shopping, travel, a Clark Griswold-style holiday display, or to simply treat yourself. Enter this national contest at extrasports1300.com for a chance to fulfill your winter wish list. Sponsored by Level Up Falcon. Weight loss, hormone therapy, and IVs. Level up your health. Joe Burrow feeling down on his birthday, or around his birthday. Think it's a guy that has kind of lost his joy a little bit or is struggling to find it. Almost every year follows the same script. Joe Burrow carries a bad roster for a few weeks, suffers a catastrophic injury, works his way back to find that the Bengals are in the same spot. Rinse, repeat. This text coming in from the 719. This is from Scott. Wonder if Burrow is more frustrated by the team not protecting him and the injuries, or having arguably the best wide receiver, and T. Higgins is awesome too, and not winning more. I think it's the former. And look, it's not like the Bengals haven't done things for Joe Burrow that he's asked. And T. Higgins is a perfect example. Joe Burrow campaigned for the Bengals to give T. Higgins a contract extension, and they did. So it's not as if the Cincinnati Bengals have done nothing for Joe Burrow. But that might be the entirety of the list. They did that one thing, but they haven't done much else. And that counts for something, that they did extend T. Higgins. But it doesn't make everything all better. And in some ways, the Bengals, by doing that, did placate their star quarterback, but did not actually do what's best for the organization. So in a weird way, it actually shows the Bengals' ineptitude that they could be spending that money elsewhere, and chose to give Joe Burrow his toy back. But I think the frustration is more about the physical and mental toll that these injuries and rehabs have taken on Joe Burrow. And the fact that he steps in there once again and takes a hit or two, and all of this stuff comes rushing back to his brain to say, oh no, is this the next one? The next hit, am I going to be out? And look, injuries happen. Injuries happen to guys with elite offensive lines. Injuries happen to guys with bad offensive lines. Some people are just snake bit, and maybe there's an argument to be made for that when it comes to Joe Burrow. But I don't know if you can just chalk it up to that, because you see the Cincinnati Bengals, and here's a great example. You saw the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Denver Broncos this season without Joe Burrow. For a Denver Broncos team that wins every game the exact same way, completely one-sided for 3 quarters. One-sided meaning it's the defense plays well, the offense doesn't do anything for 3 quarters. 4th quarter, it all comes together. Broncos win a close game. Almost every single one of their games are that way. But against the Cincinnati, one of the few exceptions is the game against the Cincinnati Bengals, where they did not have Joe Burrow. They had everybody else, but just missing Joe Burrow allowed the Denver Broncos to absolutely destroy those Bengals, which shows you just how bad this roster is and how much Joe Burrow is. And I forget which Spider-Man it is. It's one of them. I think it's Tobey Maguire, where he's trying to stop the train. And you look, I think Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland also had similar scenes. They always do one scene where Spider-Man is holding on to his webs for dear life to either keep somebody from falling or stop some kind of bad thing of happening. I think Tom Holland, he was holding like two buildings together. But the one I remember is Tobey Maguire at the front, and then at the end, it was Tobey Maguire because they were handing him off. He was so exhausted and drained that the people on that train were like lifting him like he's crowd surfing. I mean, that's seemingly Joe Burrow every single week. And look, he has some help. He has the webbing. The webbing is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But he's still, each and every week, using every fiber of his being to keep the train from crashing. And the minute he's out, that train crashes. And you saw it this year. I think that's what it's more about. And I think he's got to go somewhere else. If we're going to ensure that Joe Burrow will be around for the long haul, he's got to be in a different uniform. Because the worst thing you can do, the most hopeless feeling that any sports fan has, and you can relate to this if you are a Colorado sports fan, is having a bad owner. There's no more helpless feeling than the owner of your team being awful, because they are the most difficult to get rid of. And you know what organization in Colorado I am speaking about. But it's the most helpless feeling. You can fire coaches. You can let players walk. You could trade them. You can cut them. You can fire GMs. But the owners, they're in it for the long haul. And there's no one that can tell them to leave unless it's Roger Goodell. And Mike Brown has not done anything to warrant that phone call. And that's where the Cincinnati Bengals are. Their biggest problem is ownership. I think Zach Taylor's a decent head coach. They got one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league in Joe Burrow. They have one of the best 3 receivers. They probably have 2 of the best 10 receivers in the NFL. Cupboard isn't completely bare. And Sean Payton talks about this all the time. Right? What did he say earlier this year? There are 20 teams in this league that have absolutely no chance because of what's at the top of the organization. And the Bengals are one of those. This isn't just about losing. Okay, I think Joe Burrow, and if it was just losing, I would have a little less sympathy for Joe Burrow, if I'm being honest. But it's not just losing. And I don't even think that's the number one thing. It starts with the injuries and the grueling rehabs just to get back to the losing situation. I think Minnesota would be a great fit. Successor to Matthew Stafford. Can't beat him, join him. Joe Burrow lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl, and he takes over for Matthew Stafford. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, how many teams would not trade their current quarterback for Joe Burrow? Kansas City wouldn't. Buffalo wouldn't. I don't think Baltimore would. Is that the list? I mean, you know, Bo Nix and the Broncos are having a great season. You wouldn't tell me that if the Bengals called up George Payton and said, hey, you want Joe Burrow, you wouldn't give Bo Nix up in a heartbeat? And look, there are teams where I don't see the situation getting that much better. I have seen a lot of mock trades, even before all of this, a lot of mock trades putting him in with the Jets. Ugh, that is one of the very few places that Joe Burrow is not going to be able to find his joy is with the New York Jets. They have the same issues that Cincinnati has. So I don't know how going to New York, maybe that's a better trade partner from Cincinnati's perspective with all the draft capital the Jets have. But I don't know that that's a better landing spot for Joe Burrow. Does Joe Burrow need to be traded? Or are we looking at the second coming of Andrew Luck and a shock retirement way too soon? 719-24-7, 1313. We'll have more Drive Time Sports after this. Welcome in hour 2 on this Thursday night football between the Bucs and Falcons. One of those teams is interesting. Our coverage from Westwood One begins at 5:30. Still plenty of time to accomplish what we would like to accomplish. 719-247-1313 is the number you could call or text into the show. And don't forget, you can watch the show on our social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The handle is the same in all of those places. Got to do the @ XTRA Sports 1300. And if you're doing that, you can just drop a comment right there on your social media platform of choice. I said yesterday that the details of Sharon Moore's firing at Michigan would come out over the coming hours and days. And I knew there was more to this. I knew I wanted it to be, and I don't want to say that having an inappropriate relationship with a staffer is like normal or in any way okay, or to say it's just that. Because that's bad enough. But I knew even though there would be more to this story, I was hoping that it at least ended there. Because the more information that was going to come out, it was just going to get uglier and uglier, and it absolutely has. And what is wild is I mentioned the news of Sharon Moore being fired. Okay, sign off shortly thereafter. Go to Colorado's Rib and Chop House, host the Joe Scott Show. I get back in my car. I had no idea what was happening in the world of Sharon Moore during that time. And I get back in the car and I turn on the radio, and the story has moved light years from where it was when I brought it up on yesterday's show. Now, at this point, the only things that have been confirmed by entities that you can take them at their word: Michigan firing him. That's done. That happened. Sharon Moore is no longer the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. And he was arrested. Or he's brought in for questioning or held. He was apprehended by law enforcement on an investigation of an alleged assault. That is the extent of what is known, because it has been put out in a statement by sources that you cannot question: the University of Michigan and law enforcement in the state of Michigan. Everything else it has not been made official by those kind of entities. So, and I think that's an important thing to point out. Now, I'm not reporting this as a news story. I'm not reporting this to you. I am reacting to the news of the day, and some of the news of the day involves rumor. But I think it's important to point out what we know for a fact. Now, people, and some of them, John U. Bacon, who is a Michigan historian, he's been on this show before. He's written books about Michigan football, went on Detroit television today and said that the assault in question was Sharon Moore going to where this woman, this young woman that he had this relationship with, and with a knife threatened her life and his. It is also being reported that Michigan knew of this relationship and waited till just now to fire him over it. And there are reports that Michigan was aware that Sharon Moore was not in the best headspace, and yet they fired him without HR or security present, which is significant as this story unfolds, because what was Michigan's responsibility in all of this if he did indeed go and threaten this young woman? If Michigan knew that he was mentally unstable, there is some liability here that could be pointed out in a court of law, like, hey, you knew this guy was off, and yet you triggered him by firing him, and no one's saying they shouldn't fire him, but there are some precautions and guardrails that you put in place with an individual like this that maybe Michigan didn't. And all of that stuff is going to come out later. But this story is absolutely insane. Now, it would be insane enough to simply, and again, I use that word loosely, this is not an okay thing to do by any stretch of the imagination, and it shows how bad of a person Sharon Moore is, that he would do this. But if it were to simply be this relationship with a staffer, and that was the end of it, that would be disappointing. It would be gross. And it would just be a really bad story. But everything that has come out since makes it absolutely nuts. And you just wonder why, and unfortunately in sports, we have numerous occasions, maybe not to the extent that this Sharon Moore story is going, but we look at these incredibly successful people that seem to have it all, but that means they have a lot to lose, and yet show an unbelievable lack of judgment and do things to actively torpedo what for many of them is their dream occupation. And not that this matters a ton, but it applies to Sharon Moore's case. Sharon Moore being the Michigan head coach is a little bit of a head scratcher in the first place, isn't it? Like, we know why he's the head coach, but this is not a guy that is going to be able to overcome this and get another job. There was maybe only one job in America that Sharon Moore could even get, and it was Michigan, because Jim Harbaugh wanted it so. So this guy, and I just bring that up to say this guy was living an even more charmed life, getting a job that he probably didn't deserve on merit. And yet he had it, and then all of this stuff goes on. But it is taken a very disturbing turn and a very real world turn. And I hope the alleged victim of this alleged assault is okay, and she doesn't get a total pass for the relationship, but nothing anyone does, deserves someone to threaten them with their life. Okay, so if you want to say that she was wrong in all of this too, I'm not going to disagree with you. Now, there is a power dynamic. There is a dynamic of someone who they should both know better, but somebody who should know better than the other, and that is Sharon Moore. There's somebody with more to lose in all of this. So there are levels to it, is my point. So the real world part of this is going to get sorted out, and we're going to find out. We're going to be able to separate fact from fiction. But there is a sports angle to this, which I believe leads to the most likely successor to Sharon Moore at Michigan being Kalen DeBoer. When I think about the names, and Kalen DeBoer is not the only name that is out there, but when I, run these names through my head, the one that just makes the most sense is Kalen DeBoer. And I said it when he took over for Nick Saban. I don't begrudge the guy for taking that job. You absolutely do. The competitor in you, how could you not want to take the Alabama job? But everything since, and I'm not even talking about the success on the field or lack thereof in the perception of Crimson Tide fans. I'm just saying the fit hasn't looked right yet. And you can take that job at Alabama. You could give it a try. It hasn't been terrible. But I knew it wasn't going to, it was inevitably going to end badly. Didn't think Kalen DeBoer was a fit for the culture down there. And stepping into the shoes of Nick Saban is a job that I don't know that anyone would actually survive. It's always better to be the guy, not the guy after the guy after the guy that's after the guy. You want to have that buffer. The next person to take over Alabama is going to be in a much better situation than Kalen DeBoer is. But a team whose inclusion in the college football playoff is a little in question, we have to say, and if not for a temper tantrum that Notre Dame threw, Alabama would be where all of our attention is on why are they in, and debating and discussing that throughout the week. So their inclusion is, we're not talking about a shoo-in for the college football playoff here. And we have seen Oklahoma v. Alabama before. And they're going to meet again a week from tomorrow. Can't you just see all of these things lining up to Oklahoma beating Alabama and Kalen DeBoer ending up in Michigan? One way or another. Michigan paying Alabama to get Kalen DeBoer, or Alabama firing Kalen DeBoer. It just, when I think of all of the names that could be out there, and this is a interesting time in the calendar for Michigan to all of a sudden have an opening. But I've run through a lot of these names. Kalen DeBoer is the one that just, it screams to me that this makes the most sense. All right, I know the Barstool connection to the University of Michigan. I don't know, because there's a bigger Michigan story here about some of the recent head coaches at that school, especially if all of this that's being reported turns out to be true about Sharon Moore. I don't see how they can trot out John Gruden. I mean, they need the squeakiest, cleanest coach that they can find. They can't have anyone with any kind of baggage. So I don't see the Gruden fit. I don't think that makes sense. Kenny Dillingham would be a solid hire. But I mean, is there a long enough track record there for Michigan fans to truly believe that they can get back to where they expect to be with Kenny Dillingham? He's done a great job at Arizona State. The expectations in Tempe are not what they are in Ann Arbor. I don't think they're getting anybody that currently is an analyst on Fox or ESPN, if you're getting where I'm going with a couple of potential names out there. I mean, their options are somewhat limited. But they got to get this right because the transfer portal exists and they have a supremely talented soon-to-be sophomore quarterback that is going to have every, and not it. I don't want to speak in future tense. Right now, Bryce Underwood's representatives are probably getting phone calls from a Baton Rouge area code, as well as many other area codes. It is going to be a feeding frenzy for the services of Bryce Underwood. So Michigan is going to have to thread a needle. The coaching hiring cycle is largely over. They can't bring in anybody with any stains on their resume, but they got to hit on it or else Bryce Underwood's going to leave Ann Arbor. It's not a good situation from a football standpoint, but more importantly, from an athletic department, because Michigan doesn't seem to be blameless in all of this. They don't look like they handled it the best way possible. This is a mess, an absolute mess in Ann Arbor. And football is only one small part of that. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the wild story that is Sharon Moore's firing and subsequent apprehension, I believe is the official terminology from police in Michigan. He is still in custody, as ESPN reported earlier this afternoon. Time is running out to cast your vote for this week's Athlete of the Week. Things are tightening up between the two basketball players that are nominated this week, Dylan Orocho of Harrison and Sammy Nickel of Peyton. But we also have two other very worthy candidates in Cole Harris from Palmer Ridge and Conley Polsgrove from Pine Creek. You can see what they did to warrant nomination and cast your vote at extrasports1300.com. The winner will be announced on tomorrow's show. It's our Extra Sports Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. This coming from Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, terrific college football writer, just tweeted this out as I went to break talking about Sharon Moore. The president of Michigan, not the state, the university, Domenico Grasso, sent students and faculty a letter. And in the letter, I think the biggest takeaway here is it says, when the findings of a university investigation into Coach Moore's behavior were presented on Wednesday, we immediately terminated his employment. That's a big thing in here because there are quite a few people that have either connections to Michigan or are well-sourced within the college football community that are claiming that Michigan knew earlier than yesterday. And the timeline, and maybe that's when they launched the investigation. But how long ago did they launch it, and does that match up with what people are saying, how long Michigan knew of this relationship? And there's, an alleged 55% raise that this person got. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I don't want to present every single thing as absolute fact, but there's a lot of stuff being thrown out, and not all of it is with people with Twitter handles that end in 8 random numbers, if you understand what I'm saying here. These are people that are looked to for college football information that are saying this, people who have connections to the University of Michigan that are saying that maybe this should have and could have been done earlier. Now, why Michigan wouldn't? My guess is that if we believe that Michigan knew longer than they are letting on, right? Or further back than this investigation was launched. To me, that says they were going to continue on with Sharon Moore as the head coach at Michigan. So the question that so often comes up, and I heard Andy Staples on Jim Rome before I went on air say something to this effect as well, like what changed? Because I do, in all honesty, have a hard time believing that the powers that be at Michigan were blindsided by the results of the investigation. I'm sorry, college is not that far removed from high school. People heard things. There's no way that they couldn't. And what I mean by college not being that far away from high school, the dynamics on a college campus are very similar to what they are in high school, which is a lot of chatter, a lot of rumors. Nobody on a college campus stays quiet about juicy gossip. So I do have a hard time believing that Michigan launched, okay, let's just see. We're hearing some things. Let's launch an investigation. And then there was a lot of pearl clutching going on when they found out. I have a hard time believing that. That doesn't mean that that's not true. I'm just looking at what's been presented so far, and I'm like, I don't think Michigan is going to come out of this smelling like a rose. And then after a lot of flowery language about not living up to Michigan standards and all of that kind of stuff, they did ask for students and faculty if they had additional information about this relationship, essentially, to reach out to them so they could gather. I mean, they already fired the guy. What is this all for? This is all for the impending court case because they fired him for cause, which means they don't owe him a dime. You think Sharon Moore, not that he's a sympathetic figure whatsoever in all of this, but a legal agreement is a legal agreement. You don't think Sharon Moore is going to have lawyers going after Michigan to try and get some of that buyout and trying to fight the idea that he was fired for cause? I mean, they already fired him. That's the only explanation on why they're continuing to solicit tips and leads and information on all of this is so that they can build their case for the inevitable fight with Sharon Moore over this buyout that they are claiming they don't have to pay him because they fired him for cause. This is going to, you thought, now maybe it won't move at warp speed like it did in just a few hours. I mean, he was taken into custody 3 hours after he was fired. Maybe this story won't move at that speed, but there's going to be more. We don't even know for sure if the victim of the alleged assault is this young woman he had the relationship with. We don't even have that confirmed by law enforcement yet. And all of this kind of stuff about how far it went back. Did he give her this massive raise? And was this the first? I mean, there's just a whole slew of stuff. Some of it, is something worth discussing on this program. A lot of it probably won't be. Different forum somewhere else. And that's why I moved to the football side of it, because I don't know that relationship is the lasting story here. I think on the sports talk radio show, who's going to take over for him at Michigan is the bigger sports story for sure. But that just came out from Michigan, University of Michigan president, still gathering information so they can protect themselves against any lawsuits that may come their way. 719-24-7, 1313, back after this. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to call or text into the show on this Sharon Moore story that got infinitely more crazy, or crazier to use proper grammar, as the night went on last night. Brett texting in says, I'm not sure I believe the conspiracy theory that people knew earlier. Due process takes a long time, especially when you are likely to be sued as a result of your decision. Yeah, I mean, but I think you're right, but Michigan has, and it's part of what's going into this now coaching search. They have the money to get anyone. And why I bring that up is I don't know that I think they want to protect themselves, certainly, but Sharon Moore's buyout is nothing, for the University of Michigan. So you may be right. I just think it's hard. It is difficult to believe that the administration at the University of Michigan were shocked by the findings of this investigation. And look, does the University of Michigan and their athletic department deserve the benefit of the doubt? Maybe that's the better thing to bring up. Right? And maybe I am letting that influence my thinking a little bit here. But I know what's happening with Sharon Moore is another level. Say what you will about what Jim Harbaugh did and his football program did. It's not this. Okay, so I just want to be clear about that. But this institution has not had a great track record lately of policing their football program. So if they didn't hear anything, if they didn't know of anything, maybe the question could be brought up, well, shouldn't you have? Right? Because you're coming off of the Connor Stallions thing. Maybe you should keep a closer watch over your football program. Maybe you should, at any hint of impropriety, immediately launch an investigation. I mean, couldn't you say that would be warranted given the recent history of the Michigan football program? I'm not saying you have to make a whole big production out of it, but I mean, I'm shocked by what I hear about Sharon Moore in this whole situation. But I would imagine the closer you get to the Michigan football program, the less shocked you are about what happened with Sharon Moore and what was going on. So we don't know, at least I haven't been able to find like the timeline of Michigan saying we launched the investigation at this time because we heard this and this is how long it took and all of this kind of stuff. That will all happen later, because Michigan's part in all of this is going to be under the microscope. Right now, it's Sharon Moore. It's kind of like, Michigan, we're not done with you. We'll circle back with you on all of this. But right now, the attention is on Sharon Moore and his behavior. Oh, we'll see. Brett chases it with a more lighthearted Text. Philip Rivers' wife just had a baby. She didn't know about it because she calls having a baby Thursday. He's going to start on Sunday. And the way I'm saying that, I'm not reporting it. I'm just telling you it's going to happen. Philip Rivers is going to be the starting quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. This story is happening. And so keep the jokes flowing because Philip Rivers is the guy this Sunday and beyond. Knock on wood, about injuries. Philip Rivers is going to start Sunday. 5 years away from the NFL at 44 years old. And yes, with more children than I can even comprehend keeping track of. Or let alone handling. Handling's not the right word. Loving, parenting, guiding. He's starting Sunday. How about this, too? Jordan Schultz reporting that the Colts once again reached out to Sam Ehlinger and he didn't want to go to the Colts. What kind of spell does Sean Payton have Sam Ehlinger under that this guy is just cool with chilling on the Broncos practice squad all year? Did you see this? Jordan Schultz. I swore that I saw this. That once again, the Colts, because that's where Ehlinger came from, said, hey, we would like to bring you in, Sam Ehlinger. And he's like, no, I would prefer to be the third string court right here. Jordan Schultz reporting the Colts had interest in signing Sam Ehlinger off the Broncos practice squad after Daniel Jones' Achilles injury. Parker Gabriel reported this as well, Broncos writer for the Denver Post. Ehlinger, who's had multiple opportunities to leave this year, decided he wanted to stay in Denver and continue his development with Sean Payton and QB coach Davis Webb. This is remarkable, and I have to know what is behind this. I get it. You've seen the stories of Daniel Jones, by the way, but of Sam Darnold, of Baker Mayfield, of any number of quarterbacks that have passed through Kyle Shanahan's system that get rehabilitated, re-released into the wild, and to have a second act to their career. I get that, but at some point, you got to be saying, like, this is an opportunity to be a starter again in the National Football League, and you turn it down? What is going on? What has Sean Payton told Sam Ehlinger? And what does this mean for the future of Bo Nix that Sam Ehlinger is cool with just hanging out on the Broncos practice squad rather than immediately going back to an organization that he knows? And Shane Steichen's not a terrible head coach, brilliant offensive mind. The Philadelphia Eagles lament every other year that he walked out the front door. It's not like he'd be in the worst of hands in Indianapolis. Why does Sam Ehlinger want to stay on the Broncos practice squad? What has he been told? What has he been promised? And does that mean that Bo Nix is not long for the Denver Broncos starting job? It's crazy. I mean, I don't want to judge. I'll judge Sharon Moore on his life choices. I'm not going to judge Sam Ehlinger on his. But it is very bizarre to me that the Colts reached out. Sam Ehlinger said no, so then they turned to 44-year-old Phillip Rivers. This from the 719. That dude is afraid to be a starting QB in the NFL. He's fine collecting a check being on the practice squad. It's not the worst theory. Scared, afraid. I don't know about that. It's comfortable. It's comfortable where he is. Say that. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's like, you know what? The gig I got, a little bit better. I go to the Colts and I fail, and I'm done. I stay here. I stay in the NFL. So then the answer to the question of what did Sean Payton tell him, that he would have had to get assurances from Sean Payton that they would do everything in their power to make sure that he remained on the practice squad, that he is their third string quarterback, and they don't have any thoughts of changing that up this offseason or beyond. I mean, that's what the answer to that question has to be. Or at least that's what Sam Ehlinger has to believe. Is that Sean Payton likes him so much that he's in no risk of being cut and released off of the practice squad. But it does bring up an interesting question that you and I can talk about, given that our years of extensive NFL playing experience. Would you take that job? I mean, before the question was, if you're Phillip Rivers, do you take that job? That phone rings and it's Shane Steichen. Are you saying, yeah, or dadgummit, let's go? Isn't that what Phillip Rivers said? That's one question. Would you have done that? Here's the other question. Would you rather be a practice squad quarterback on the Denver Broncos or the potential savior of the Indianapolis Colts season as their starting quarterback? I don't know. Maybe I'm a sucker for the limelight, but I would go with the latter. I don't know if I would if I'm Phillip Rivers, but if I'm Sam Ehlinger, I think I would. And look, if Sean Payton loves me so much, if it doesn't go well in Indy and I'm done there, Sean Payton can always hire me back. Brett says all these conspiracy theories, I feel like I'm watching The Bachelor. Are there a lot of conspiracy theories on The Bachelor? I don't know enough about that show, but your point is well founded. We have spun some conspiracy theories today, have we not? Adds, I think Ehlinger wants to stay on the practice squad because A, he's younger, and B, the more teams he rejects, the more interesting he becomes, and thus the more money he makes. Interesting. That's an interesting take. Because I have tried this with women, and I find that it does not work. I find that the more opportunities you turn down, the fewer opportunities then come your way later. I actually find it to be the opposite. But maybe that's a me problem. Maybe you have better. I am definitely somebody that is not one to turn down an opportunity in any aspect of his life. Perhaps I am not as eligible a bachelor as Sam Ehlinger is eligible a quarterback. I really do think with this Ehlinger story, I really don't think there are any bad ideas because it is. I mean, we can all agree it's a little shocking that he wouldn't make the jump, that he wouldn't take that gig. I don't know. I would hesitate if I were Phillip Rivers, but I kind of, at the end of the day, understand why he's doing it. I mean, dadgummit is a little too much enthusiasm for my taste, given his age and how long he's been away from the league. That I wouldn't say you would. I would be reluctantly dragged back into the NFL, but I don't know. Dadgummit, let's do it. I don't know, but I guess that's how you have to attack it, right? You gotta be all in or all out. So, in summation, I'm telling you, it's going to be Phillip Rivers that will start on Sunday for the Colts, but it could have been Sam Ehlinger. But he would rather, I don't even know, is he on the sideline during the game? Where will Sam Ehlinger be when the Broncos take on the Packers? I always see Stidham. I never see Ehlinger. Is he not allowed to be on the sideline? Where is he on Sundays? Is he saying behind Condoleezza Rice? I don't know. He's got it pretty good, apparently, to turn the Colts down. 719-247-1313. Brett, you are one of a kind, man. American classic. Keep the text coming. Coming up next, the 3 stories that are driving the show. Hello there. Welcome in. We have hit the home stretch on this Thursday edition of the show because Thursday night football coming up at 5:30 between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. All of a sudden, we got a race in the NFC South. Not with the Falcons, but the Bucs have the Panthers nipping at their heels. And I think all the primetime matchups this week kind of have the same feeling. Right? It's like you look at one of the teams, Atlanta, ew. But then you're like, oh, Tampa needs this game. Sunday, Minnesota, pass. But Dallas, whoop. All of a sudden, Philadelphia opened the door for Dallas to win the NFC East. And then Monday night, isn't it Miami, Pittsburgh? Kind of same deal there. Although Miami. I mean, Pittsburgh's the main draw in that game, but you probably tuned out of Miami Dolphins programming, kind of making a little run here. But that's what all these primetime matchups, like one team that you're kind of interested in watching or isn't locked in a race of some sort, and then the other one that's like, nah. But we get these kind of matchups down the stretch, don't we? About half the league has something to play for, the other half, not so much. Tampa needs this game, and Ryan needs both Chris Godwin and Emeka Egbuka to put on a performance for what is the most important thing, fantasy football. But in the meantime, 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. All right, let's start with the happier topic because the other two are kind of bummers. Here's story number one.
I don't really care. My mom thinks we'll win, so that's all that matters.
That is Bo Nix responding to the odds makers saying Packers favored in Denver on Sunday. Maybe the line of the year from Bo Nix. I actually cut off the just nonstop. It carried on. It was like the standing ovation of fake media member laughs. Like, it's a good line. I would chuckle. People in Denver were laughing hysterically at that line from Bo Nix, which is, you know what? You're in that group, right? You're there. Bo Nix is standing right in front of you. He drops a pretty good line. You're going to probably laugh a little bit too much. Right? Same thing. A comedian tells a joke on television. Maybe you might chuckle a little bit. You're sitting there front row in the nightclub and you're laughing your head off. But it was a good line from Bo Nix. It really was. He knows the right thing to say, for sure. But the question about the Green Bay-Denver game is this for me, because the hype is growing for this game. Can the Broncos make you believe in them more if they were to beat Green Bay on Sunday the same way they beat everyone else? I don't think so, because I think the way that the Broncos win football games is the very reason why they are being doubted. because I get it all the time on the text line on Monday. I compliment the Broncos for winning another one of these games where they're able to control the game, to have it played on their terms. It's a close game. They win, which is not an easy thing to do. And then I get inundated with messages that who cares? It's this team. Or they can't keep winning this way. Well, here's the next game. Does this one change your mind? You can say with the struggles of Philadelphia and Kansas City, this would be the best win in terms of the level of opponent that the Broncos have had all year. But that was the case when they beat Philly. And it was the case when they beat Kansas City. And yet, very quickly, it turned to, yeah, that wasn't that great of a win. So the only way I think, and then look, this is a showcase game. This is a fun matchup. This is one of the better games of this slate this weekend. Both teams with a lot on the line. Both teams near the top of the standings. This is a fun matchup. I just have my doubts that beating the Packers in much the same way they beaten Kansas City and Philadelphia, not to mention all the other teams that they beat the exact same way, that is going to change a lot of hearts and minds. I think only if they absolutely blow out Green Bay will we have a different conversation about this Denver team. And I just don't see that happening. One, because Green Bay's too good to be blown out. And second, the Broncos kind of like these games that they're playing. They're comfortable in these situations. They're confident in these situations. Their identity gives way to these kind of games. They're a team built to win close games. And they don't have this next gear to blow out a lot of teams, especially one that is sitting atop arguably the best division in football. But it's a fun matchup. It's going to be a big game. Both Bo Nix and Sean Payton are imploring you to be incredibly loud if you're going to be at Empower Field, much like you were against the Kansas City Chiefs. So there's a big game feel to it. I just don't know if the conversation the next day is going to mirror that of these other big games that we have across the league. Normally when there's these showcase games, we make grand proclamations about one team or another. If the Broncos win this game like they win every other game, I don't know that we're going to get that. But I don't think Bo Nix or Bo Nix's mom care about that, because it would be another win for the Denver Broncos. Here's story number 2.
If I want to keep doing this, I have to have fun doing it. I've been through a lot, and if it's not fun, then what am I doing it for?
Joe Burrow not having as good of a time right now as Bo Nix is. That was Joe Burrow around his birthday. I believe it was on his birthday. I apologize if I got Joe Burrow's birthday wrong, although I never got an invitation to his party. Listening to Joe Burrow, though, I don't know if there was a Joe Burrow birthday party. This sounds like a guy who is looking at the way Andrew Luck went out and said, that doesn't seem like a bad idea. I think that's where we're heading with Joe Burrow. And it's not just the losing. That doesn't help. It's part of it. But it's the feeling that Joe Burrow has to have of, I get hurt, And it seems like none of his injuries are minor. They're all massive injuries that take a long time for him to come back. And I would imagine a brutal rehab. And he comes back and he's surrounded by the same garbage football team that he's been surrounded by the entirety of his career, which speaks to how good Joe Burrow is, because we get fooled into thinking the Bengals are an elite team just because Joe Burrow is playing. It's a lot to come back from every single year, it seems like. And this is an organization that is known for their cheap ways. And this is a team that has a dearth of talent at the positions that can help Joe Burrow stay healthy. T. Higgins can help Joe Burrow put up big numbers. He can't protect him from TJ Watt and company. I think we are going down a path where Joe Burrow will give us the type of retirement like Andrew Luck did, where we are shocked at a guy retiring too soon, unless there is a course correction, and that course correction cannot come from the Cincinnati Bengals, because I have followed this team, as you have, for too long to think that Mike Brown is going to be visited by 3 ghosts overnight, and he's going to wake up the next morning and write a blank check for the Bengals to go out and get every good offensive lineman they could possibly get their hands on. I don't think that the Bengals are going to change, and I don't think Joe Burrow thinks the Bengals are going to change. The course correction, the way for Joe Burrow to have fun again playing NFL football, is to not be in Cincinnati. And the team that I immediately came to my mind as a great fit for Joe Burrow, the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, there is the Justin Jefferson connection, but it's so much more than that. Minnesota is a team that made a very bad bet. And I can't sit here and say that I warned them. I can't sit here and say that I was telling Minnesota, don't let Sam Darnold walk out that front door. But the fact of the matter is, they should not have. Not that I believed in J.J. McCarthy. I'm just saying I didn't believe that Sam Darnold would be able to do what he's been doing 2 years in a row. I did not believe in J.J. McCarthy. You think I'm a Bo Nix hater. I loved Bo Nix compared to J.J. McCarthy in that draft. But anyway, Minnesota was good 5 minutes ago. And with Joe Burrow, they could be good again in a division that they really need a needle mover. With Detroit and Green Bay and now Chicago. So if it's not in Cincinnati, which I think it needs to not be in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's NFL story, Minnesota is the name that immediately comes to mind. Because they could be really good, really fast if they get Joe Burrow. But this will be the new Andrew Luck unless something changes. Story number 3. The biggest story, not only in sport, but maybe in America right now, Sharon Moore. When we left off yesterday, Sharon Moore was merely fired by Michigan for an alleged inappropriate relationship with a staffer. Now we have so many more pieces to the puzzle that have been presented where Sharon Moore allegedly went to the apartment of this young woman that he was having this inappropriate relationship with and threatened not only her life, but his own with a knife. That has been widely reported. The New York Post was the last outlet that I saw it. We know that he was apprehended. We know he was taken into custody. ESPN reported he was still in custody just hours ago. But this story is getting uglier and uglier. And there are some things that have been mentioned by solid news sources and some that have just been thrown out into the infinite nothingness that is Twitter. And I hesitate to bring those to this forum. I am not a reporter or a journalist, but I don't want to bring in stuff that anonymous Twitter bots have put out there. Maybe it all comes to light and it's all true. But this story has taken a very dramatic turn in the last 24 hours. And I think there are more turns coming up because there's a Michigan side of this on when they knew. Rich Eisen today on this very radio station said he heard rumors of Sharon Moore and what was going on an hour and a half after they lost to Ohio State. Josh Pate saying Michigan knew of this before yesterday, where the University of Michigan president is putting out a letter to teachers or faculty and students saying, when we found out Wednesday. So there is a conflict here in the timeline of what Michigan knew and when. And another report that they knew that Sharon Moore was mentally unstable, and yet they fired him without human resources or security present. And what did it seem like the first place that he went? So this moves far beyond college football and sport, and we'll see where that goes. But there's the sport angle to this that I will add at the end here and say that Michigan needs a head football coach. And there have been a lot of names thrown out over the last 24 hours. The one that just to me makes the most sense is Alabama's Kalen DeBoer. That's the one to me that I think would be a great get for Michigan. Would not bring any baggage with him, as opposed to this idea that Dave Portnoy is going to hire his buddy John Gruden or get Michigan to hire his buddy John Gruden. And maybe the best part of a Kalen DeBoer hire, he's not a Michigan man, because the idea of a Michigan man, although there are plenty of them that are upstanding people, the idea of a Michigan man, a little bit tarnished over the last couple of years, right? Maybe they need a fresh set of eyes. Maybe they need someone from the outside. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. This text coming in from Alex. Going more the football side of this, which I do appreciate because I'm not in the TMZ world. And while I am going to follow the story like you are, I think that the one branch of this story that is definitely intriguing is where Michigan goes from here as far as their head coach is concerned. Don't forget that they didn't get a bowl ban. They're supposed to play in the Citrus Bowl. They're going to play in the Citrus Bowl. But there's no sanction. Dude, really intriguing job just opened up. Alex says Sharon Moore was an offensive lineman. It was in his DNA to try and run the ball and play football between the tackles. They need somebody that's a little more open-minded and can open it up a bit. That, Alex, my friend, is Kalen DeBoer. Is it not? But I will also say that it is most college football coaches. Some of the names being bandied about, Jed Fish would apply. Lincoln Riley would apply. Now, I'm not saying all these guys are good choices. I'm just saying if that's where it starts, there's a lot of guys that would fit that description. Like Jim Harbaugh had that mentality, and it worked. They won a national championship, but Jim Harbaugh is at a different level than most everybody else. And all of this just kind of begs the question, given that Michigan is Michigan, why in the world was Sharon Moore picked to be the head coach in the first place? I know it was like this favor to Jim Harbaugh, or Jim Harbaugh, said you got to hire this guy, but does Michigan really have to do that? Did they really have to make this guy their head coach? I mean, he's done no matter what. But he was a guy, anyway, forgetting all this stuff that has gone on. The minute Sharon Moore was fired by Michigan let's just say for football reasons, which plenty of people in Ann Arbor wanted to do anyway, he would not get another job. Like, he was not qualified for the job he had. But in terms of what Sharon Moore's ideas are, I agree with you, Alex. But that's that's not going to narrow down the field very much. It's necessary. You're absolutely right. It starts there, but a lot of people fit that description. Tells you the Michigan offense. Unique. Let's call it that. I hope that there are no, additional terrible details about this story over the next 12 hours or 24 hours. But we'll give you the latest on Sharon Moore in the Michigan situation coming up tomorrow. A rebooked rookie to give the Green Bay perspective on Sunday's game, and we'll talk a lot about Green Bay and Denver as well. But for now, I bid you adieu. I appreciate your patronage. Stay tuned. The Falcons and Bucks Thursday night football coming up right now on Extra Sports 1300.